You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders, getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday. Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
Well, last week against the Rams did not exactly go as John Boyle and I had dialed it up. But, John, I could not help but notice after that game, there was actually more optimism. Nobody's okay with losing, but that felt very different than the week one loss against the 49ers.
Yeah, and I think it felt different because you knew you just went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the NFL, despite doing just about everything on offense you could to not win that game. Like, you turn the ball over 4 times against good teams, you usually get blown out.
Yeah.
So to survive that almost and, be in a position like, they're like, 5-6 yards from being in a great spot to win that game. That really tells you something about the resolve of this team, about this defense, just how good it is. And, yeah, I think you leave that game being like, shoot, we really wish we'd have won that game, but we're still 7-3. We get that team again and feel really good about the way just overall this team's performing.
That was kind of the feeling that I heard from the players as they walked into the locker room. It was, okay, we'll see you in the rematch. We'll see you in a few weeks at our place. Let's see what happens then.
Yeah, if you do that in week 15 and you're like, okay, that costs us the division, that's a little different feeling, no matter how the loss went. But,
Right.
there's so much season left. I think they feel like, okay, that not what we wanted, but plenty of time to make good for that.
It was a couple of people had said, in some ways it feels a little bit like 2012 when you lose to the Falcons and you're like, God, this really is not fun, but we can see where this team is going. And certainly you see that on defense. The Rams did not have a play of longer than 23 yards. That's pretty impressive with Matthew Stafford and what they were able to do. We did see 3 guys rotating at cornerback. That was something that was a little bit new, and I like being able to have those matchups.
Yeah, it's, classic what coaches would say is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you've got 2 guys who've played very well lately, and this is really the first time they've all been healthy for an extended stretch. So I was very curious going into the week what they do with that. And, we just saw them kind of mix and match. And there were even times that Spoon was off the field. Like, they were really kind of mixing guys in and out there, and really solid results against a great quarterback and a great offense.
And I do wonder how much, again, mix and match you see going forward. The Rams, I think, are kind of the outlier, right? Like, it's kind of the outlier case, division opponent, just a really high-powered offense. You might not need to mix and match as much in the coming weeks, or maybe you just say, yeah, we're going to use this as a chance to refine it. But either way, it's nice to have options because that is not the case with every team in the league right now.
It's great to feel like you have more starters than you need in this league because, unfortunately, injuries do happen. We've seen Josh Jobe and Reek and Spoon all miss games this year, and luckily when they do, they've got other guys to step up. I'll also be curious to see going forward, depending on opponents and matchups, is I could see them just saying we're going to play a lot of dime to get all those guys on the field. And you can get away with that a little bit more when one of your other quote-unquote safeties is built like a linebacker and Nicky Minwari. So that can be another solution to having, too many good corners is just let them all play.
I'm not sure that you're going to need quite that many this week, given the state of the Tennessee Titans. We will get to that in just a second. But how about this? From the sideline, it's hard for me to keep track of some of these numbers, but I did go back and I was just kind of making my notes on Monday morning. Early in the game, first 2 drives, they go almost the full length of the field, right? And I do also wonder what would have happened had the Hawks gotten the ball first instead of the Rams. But drives of 62 and 74 yards early in the game, everything after that, it was less than 25. Now, to be fair, some of that is just field position off of the interceptions. But, boy, that defense was fighting for every single yard.
They played so well and put in a lot of bad spots. They got just so many stops. They held one of the best offenses in the league to, 2 for 11 on third down. Matt Stafford, that was his lowest yards per completion or yards per attempt average since definitely in Detroit. I looked this up earlier in the week. But, you really kept a really good offense in check for, I just found it, 2018 is the last time he had that low of a yards per attempt average. So
that's pretty impressive.
They did, like you said, there's first couple drives. I'll argue the first drive was a little suspect because I don't get that penalty they called on Spoon at all. The guy's trying to get up.
Yeah, I don't.
Anyway, we don't need to argue about officiating. But, it's one of the best, when you consider all the circumstances, the turnovers, one of the best performances we've seen out of this defense.
And you easily could have pointed fingers after that game. I don't expect anybody, FYI, on this team to do that. But when there's such a disparity, when you look at just kind of the final numbers and you're thinking that, one side of the ball could be really upset. John, I was not in the press conference. I was in the locker room. When you hear Ernest defend his quarterback, but specifically in the way he did it, how shocked were you?
I was a little surprised, the language we heard. You don't always hear multiple F words in a press conference, but it got the point home. And it wasn't surprising to me to hear him stick up for his quarterback because I was noticing, especially after the third and fourth interception, you're like, man, this is getting bad. I was watching from the press box, it's a commercial break, so you don't see this on TV, but offense is coming off, defense coming on, and Ernest, helmet off, was going up to offensive players. And you could just see from the body language, even way up in that press box, he was just trying to pick guys up. This wasn't defense who's like, you guys put us in a bad spot again. He wasn't mad about it. It was like, we got you. And so you see that play out. And then, after the game, stood up for his quarterback about as emphatically as one could.
So emphatically, we cannot actually use that language.
I mean, I don't know. We're
not when we're recording. Do we occasionally use that language?
Yes.
Sure. I mean, yes.
Earmuffs for the kids.
Earmuffs for the kids. But yeah.
Sorry to step over you there, but to me, it just speaks to what we've been hearing about all year about this, how connected this group is and how close this team is.
Yeah, and that actually goes back to Tennessee last year. But first, when you talk about adversity, how the team is going to handle it, I really liked Mike McDonald's perspective and just kind of how he thinks about that as he shared it with the media.
Yeah, I think when you start walking around talking about process over result, and then all of a sudden some result happens that you don't like, and then you start talking about the result, then what are we doing? It's kind of like coaching the result. Hey, tackle better. Well, okay, how are we going to get that done? We got to run the ball better. Well, you can't just tell Clint to call better plays that are going to work. It's you got to go back through the whole process of what goes behind all those things. And so if we're going to back up what we've been saying, we're just going to dial in our process. Those things can change. We changed a little bit how we're going to practice this week because we feel like what the team needs to take the next step. That's going to be our approach. But the mentality, all those principles that we talk about, that'll stay the same. And our goal is to continue to get better. We realize there's a great opportunity to get better. You leave the game saying, man, we can get better and we need to do it in a hurry. There needs to be a sense of urgency now because we got to start playing our best football, wherever in the season now, or second half of the year going to the last quarter of the season.
I'm not saying Mike's done this, but I have a hard time believing the head coach is not in the course of a game when things aren't going well, told the coordinator, call better plays.
Call better plays. That would be the first thing I would think of, yes.
We all get frustrated. I'm sure that's probably some version of that has come out of just about every head coach's mouth. But yeah, this has been a big talking point all year is this process. And he made this point after the game of if they make that field goal, if they get, a few more yards on the drive, it's the same going into Monday.
Right.
You'd still have the turnover issues to correct. You'd still have this great defensive performance to look at. It's, you'd still evaluate the tape the same. You'd just be a little happier while you did it. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then you'd still flip your attention Monday afternoon once they get past that to the upcoming opponent, the Tennessee Titans. So that's, different coaches may use different language to get that point across, but that's such a big thing in this sport is you got to just stick with that process. Or if you get too caught up in all the other stuff, that's when you go lay an egg.
Well, and the fact that every player is using the word process over and over and over again. In fact, I wrote kind of a little note off to the side, and I was laughing yesterday. I'm like, you would think that professional athletes talked about results more, like the outcomes. Mm-hmm. Nope, we spend a lot of time talking about their process, which I think some people roll their eyes and be like, oh my gosh. Nope, that is where you actually get better during the course of the day. Now, you talk about how close they were to getting a win. John, I got to be honest. Before the game, the Rams punter is punting towards the Seahawks sidelines. And we are standing there, and John Schneider is doing an interview with Steve Rabel, and I'm standing there with a group of people, and it's like, heads up, the ball is coming over here. And at first you're kind of laughing because you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Then you watch what he did.
Practicing getting that
on the final punt. And it was remarkable. You get a bounce. You get a bounce. And look, we have seen Michael Dixon with some amazing punts. That was the play of the game.
Yeah. For in that moment to be able to put that ball out of bounds at the one, it just, I I think if the ball goes goes in the end zone and starts at the 20, we're talking about a
Yes.
different result here because not only do you just have 20 fewer yards to cover, but like it changes your play calling on those. You're not backed up in your own end zone with, by the way, a left guard who has not played a snap all year.
Yes.
Shout out to Christian Haynes for. I mean, if you make a bad mistake to start that drive, game's over.
Yes.
You grab a guy, you let a guy get by you. So like give him some credit. But yeah, I mean, hats off to Ethan Evans, but like that's a ridiculous punt, and that really I think was the biggest deciding factor in that game because we've seen them do it over and over, and I think they go get that ball down to the 30-yard line and kick a field goal.
Yep, yeah, a couple of yards would have made a difference, but as you mentioned, it was also Christian Haynes who held his own on those first snaps when you were backed up at the goal line that made a big difference in where they ended up.
He hadn't played football in a minute, really, or live football for that matter, and so we'll see what Gray's situation is, and you got to go, man. Like we've seen in our football team, if somebody can't go for a certain amount of time, whether it's practice or games, the standard stays the same. We expect you to go in and go rip it for us, and he did that. Like he didn't bat an eye, and there's things he's going to learn from the game, and we're going to need him to play at a high level if he needs to play this week. Yeah,
a few of us talked to Christian Haynes in the locker room yesterday, and he referred to that as a surreal moment, which is a good explanation or a good description of like. You got it. We always hear players say, "It's like you got to stay ready," and he was. He's engaged in the game, and he says he's warming up between series to make sure his body's warm. But to be thrown in that exact moment of 1 yard line, go get a game-winning drive, that's a tough spot. But we hear it. It's kind of cliche, but it's true. This like next man up mentality. If guys aren't ready in the moment when they're called upon, that's where the team can get hurt. And we've seen tons of guys, really both sides of the ball, probably more so on defense, really step up. And, that's to win in this league, you got to do that because, unfortunately, injuries happen.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time watching guys just staying warm on the sidelines, right?
Bike,
Whether on the bike,
yeah.
they're kind of blocking into each other, just kind of making sure that they've got the feel of the game. It takes a lot of mental stamina to stand on the sidelines and pay attention to everything.
I think Olu might, now he's starting, but when he's not, he might put in more miles on that bike than like a spin instructor. I mean, every time you look down, he's just got the arm things and he's just going.
Yeah, I know this because I tend to stand next to that bike, and Olu has more than once had to ask me to kindly step out of the way. I don't have to worry about that right now because he is currently starting, and while we have not seen him in that role yet this year, don't forget he was in a battle for that position, that starting position. He had an injury that took him out of the mix, but now, well, it's like he never left that starting spot.
Yeah, seamlessly. I mean, he's same guy. He's ready to go, prepared, executed at a high level, I thought. Snaps were clean. I mean, made the right calls. It's great to have him ready to go, It shows you the way he's been preparing and the way he practiced throughout the offseason was worthy of playing time, not like corner where you can just rotate centers. At some point you got to make a decision and roll with it. So,
yeah, I really like to kind of give credit to Olu when we get a chance to because he's had kind of a weird couple of years that if you don't have the right mental approach could really mess a guy up. Of like, you come into last season. He's a starter in camp. Like, he's looking like he's going to be a starter, and then you go sign the veteran and Connor Williams, and boom, you lose your job through no fault of your own. It's just they decide to bring in a veteran guy. And then Connor Williams shocks everyone and retires midway through the year. So now you're like, okay, Olu, go start. Did a great job to finish the year. They won 6 of their last 8 games, and he was a big part of that. Now, similar this year, of like, coming in camp, you'd have probably pegged him as a favorite for that job, and he's getting a lot of first-team reps. And then, unfortunately, he gets the back injury. And Jalen Sundell, credit to him, takes hold of it and doesn't let go. And now Olu finds himself on the bench again. And then, boom, injury comes up. Olu, we need you to go do it. Yep. And he's doing a great job. So, yeah, that to me really speaks to just a guy's like, I mean, A, just like the physical abilities and the understanding, but B, just that like mental fortitude to not get down and not feel like, oh, these things are going against me, blah, blah, blah. He just stepped up and did a good job. Yeah,
he did. And he is going to be starting again this week and for the next few weeks, I would imagine, with Jalen Sundell on IR. Tell you what, before we take a look at this week's, my days are messed up. Before we take a look at this week's matchup, let's pause for a word from our presenting sponsor.
Seattle is a city wired for change, where innovation drives the everyday, and Delta is proud to invest in that momentum. With nonstop flights to over 60 global destinations from Seattle, Delta connects you to the world. with thoughtfully designed cabins, premium service, and a seamless travel experience, all while supporting the community you call home. So your travel time feels more like me time. Delta, flying Seattle forward. Visit delta.com or download Delta's app to book your next trip.
At this point in the year, we are, of course, tracking playoff implications for everything and every team in the division. You know who else is doing the same thing? Well, it is our fantasy insider, Scott Engel.
Thanks, Jen and John. And we get into week 12 of fantasy football. The playoffs are getting closer and closer, so every matchup is magnified. 4 more teams on a bye in week 12, so we tell you who to start when faced with tough lineup decisions. We'll start at quarterback. Jared Goff, top 6 fantasy quarterback for week 12. He faces the Giants, who allow the second most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Also, Jacoby Brissett, a top 10 start this week. In each of the last 5 weeks, Jacoby Brissett has finished as a fantasy quarterback 1. He's getting a lot of volume, and despite the fact that Marvin Harrison is not playing, he's still gunning the ball a lot for fantasy purposes. And running back, earlier this week in his press conference, Mike McDonald said that Kenneth Walker is earning more carries, more touches, and that's good for fantasy purposes because he faces the Titans this week, and they rank 25th in fantasy points per game allowed to opposing running backs. Also at running back for a solid floor, go with Alvin Kamara in a PPR league against the Atlanta Falcons. And wide receiver, back to that Lions-Giants game, Jamison Williams is coming on strong. He is in a smash spot against the Giants. Must start as a fantasy wide receiver 2 this week. Rome Odunze should also have a bounce-back game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. At tight end, you always look for whatever tight end is starting against the Cincinnati Bengals. This week, it's Hunter Henry. He is a regular target for touchdowns, and nobody allows more touchdowns to tight ends than the Cincinnati Bengals. On defense, it's rare that you can use a defense consecutive weeks in a row, but you can use the Seahawks defense the next 3 weeks and just lock them into your lineup because of good matchups. That defensive line is playing tremendous. Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, the secondary, Reek Woolen is playing shutdown ball again. Devin Witherspoon, he does it all. He's back, and that's going to translate into sacks and turnovers for the Seahawks fantasy defense over the next 3 weeks. For more from me from Week 12, go to the News tab and Fantasy Insider on Seahawks.com, and also check me out at rotoballer.com. Back to you, Jen and John.
Thank you, Scott. All right, John, it is the Tennessee Titans this week, and we have waited a little while to have this conversation because the Titans are in a transition year, and it has been a little bit of a struggle as they have tried to find their footing on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're 1-9. There's no sugarcoating. This has been a rough year for them. They've, you draft quarterback number 1. You hope that brings you like future success, and big picture wise, they're excited about Cam Ward, but in the immediate, they're struggling. I mean, really on both sides of the ball, they're beat up a little bit, and they've not been playing great football, but they've also been competitive at times, and you can't go into the game in this league being like, oh, this team's bad, we got it, because that's when you get in trouble.
Well, yes, they have been in some close games. They've only scored more than 20 points, one time. That was a win against Arizona, but it is the Cam Ward factor that can play up in this game because he is coming off a pretty good game against a Texans defense that has been very solid all year long. And so it really is the unpredictability that becomes his greatest asset.
Credible arm, you can see why he's number 1 pick. Probably has more control over the offense than you would initially anticipate going into the week. Incredible arm talent. And makes a ton of throws from funky flat like platforms and stuff. So you got to play the whole play through it. And if you start making things up and not handling your assignments through the echo of the whistle, he can definitely make you pay.
You know who else echoed those sentiments? Elijah Arroyo.
Yeah.
It was Cam Ward was his quarterback in college.
And he's played through it.
He knows exactly what that is. It was kind of funny because Arroyo said, this is only the second time I'm going to play against a former teammate. It was Kitchens last week with the 2 interceptions. They were former teammates. But But he said this week is going to be a little bit weird. And in talking about Cam, he said, yeah, he is going to take some calculated risks. And that's what he loved about being his teammate. He said it's the risks that he takes and the ability to make every single throw that just gave you confidence as an offense. Now, I will point out that there are only 4 healthy receivers that practiced early in the week for the Titans. So his targets might be limited, but you know that he is capable of doing some big things if you were the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic, like, quarterback who can just make cool things happen off script. I haven't watched a lot of Titans football this year, but it feels like every week you see a clip come across your timeline of some nutty throw he made on the run, thrown across the field. So he's the kind of player that, like, you can't assume a play's dead, and he can beat you. I mean, the arm talent's just pretty ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, look, this Seahawks defense has been really good, and you obviously like their chances against an offense that's been struggling, but not a quarterback you can take lightly.
Right, and we have seen far too many weeks in the NFL where you have upsets or crazy finishes or games that you did not expect to be close that ended up to be just complete shockers. The numbers, though, do tend to favor a really solid Seahawks defense. Right now, the Titans, well, they are averaging the fewest yards per game, just 242, averaging just 4.2 yards per play, the fewest first downs in a game, and the lowest third down percentage in a game. So all of this says, hey, Seahawks, go out and do all the things that you talked about improving on last week.
Yeah, go take care of business.
Now, on the other side of the ball, Jeffrey Simmons is the name that comes up quite a bit. He is one that you can't take lightly. I know Sam Darnold's going to have his eye on him because Mike McDonald's knows this year. Nope, I'm going to do that because I accidentally slurred the word. Sorry. Because Mike McDonald knows the talent he is.
Jeffrey's a great player. He's you don't see a lot of like A-gap players that can play inside and out. Judy can rush outside too, play all 3 downs. And we have some guys that are like that too. Murph, Leo, Jay Reed, but he's one of those. He's one of the best, and he plays hard and plays physical, and they do a good job of moving around and matching him up. So he's a guy that we're gonna have to account for.
Yeah, we just talked earlier about the Seahawks having 2 backups in their starting interior line right now. Again, they have all the faith in the world in Olu and Christian Haynes to step up, but not an easy test. I mean, this is one of the truly elite interior linemen in the league. What football people sometimes like to call a game wrecker, the kind of guy who can just make plays go really bad in a hurry. So, that's going to be probably the biggest test this team faces on offense, is keeping him from getting that interior pressure and making life hard on Sam Darnold and the run game for that matter.
Although the Seahawks did see him fairly recently.
They did last August for practice. And if I recall,
there's forever ago.
If I recall, there's a pretty viral clip of him doing some bad things to the Seahawks in bad practice. So.
Well, you know what I think was funny? It was Leonard Williams this week saying, oh, yeah, I love those joint practices.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I am pretty sure you have been involved in a few skirmishes in both of those cases. Of course you like it. You're the biggest guy on the field, and you were starting stuff. But we were teasing earlier in the podcast about how a trip to Tennessee actually got the Seahawks to where they are. And that's something that you spent a lot of time diving into this week, John, just how transformative, maybe that's too big of a word, but having that preseason game and that time together really was for Mike and his staff.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a team coming together with, you had a lot of young players who some hadn't played together, some had, but the whole new coaching staff, I mean, it was like literally Carl Scott and Nico Thorpe were the only holdovers, I believe, last year. So it was this chance to get them all in one area. It wasn't just, I mean, the football was important, but it was, the team dinners they did and just the different things to get them to bond as a group. And pretty much every player I talked to yesterday about it, and Mike McDonald as well, talked about that not just being important for that team in that moment, but really like carrying over to this year. Again, this conversation of the togetherness of this team, how connected this team is, the way guys play for each other. A lot of that started back in Nashville last summer.
I found it funny that they went back and looked at the practice video.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I assumed, I don't know why, I assumed that you would just delete that or tape over it, as if they're still using old school tape that needs to be taped over. And that is not how that works.
Who taped these ER reruns over this?
Exactly. I couldn't watch the end of 90210. Are you kidding me? There's only a few people that are going to get that one.
Listeners,
anyway,
90210 was a popular show.
that actually did happen, and I was so mad at my brother that time. But I thought it was funny. First of all, it is attention to detail, but truly like what you're looking at. And Mike just laughed and he was like, I'm really glad that this was a close practice and nobody could see this.
Yeah. I mean, you think of how early in this process for Mike that was. Like, they were figuring a lot of stuff out then. And yeah, much better team than they were, just much more cohesive. But yeah, again, those times are, and again, I think it's less the practices they had there than just the experience of being away.
Getting to know each other.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. Well, you are going to get to know what John and I need to see from the Seahawks for a win on Sunday right after this word from our presenting sponsor.
Seahawks fans, 12 Status is back benefiting you this season. One passing yard gets you 1 mile all Seahawks season long. 12 Status members get priority boarding out of SeaTac all Seahawks season long. And 12 Status members get a 12% discount at the Seahawks Pro Shop on the 12th of each month. Sign up now at 12status.com.
Okay, John, here we go. 2 things you need to see for a Seahawks win.
I mean, can I just take the super obvious one? Like, stop turning the ball over,
well,
please.
That's what it's going to,
I mean, way too many turnovers. And, some games you can survive it, some you can't. But just for the, long-term improvement of this team, look, some of these turnovers we've seen haven't been that costly because you're up 35-0 against Arizona or whatever it was. Even if they race out to a big lead, I still don't want to see them turn the ball over. Just play a clean game, avoid that. I think that'll just help the offense going forward and to, show themselves they can do it. I'll stick with the offense for the other one. I want to see 3 running backs with 10 or more carries, because that's going to tell me that they did everything else in this game to get. Because if you're getting to the point where Helani, Charbonnet, and Kenneth Walker, it's funny. Mike McDonald talked this week about Kenneth Walker earning some more opportunities, which I think he has. But this might not be the game. If they can take care of business and do what they want, you might not need Kenneth Walker to carry the ball 20, 25 times. And Helani's been good when he's gotten a chance. So I'd love a game where you can run the ball enough to get all those guys involved.
I was going to say in the run game, I would love to see their yards per carry go up. I totally understand it's a softening process, as Abe Lucas says.
Every week. He likes to point out to you, I've been saying to you, I like how he says that to you.
He says it with a smile, by the way. If you listen to those post-game interviews, he does say it with a smile. He is one of my favorites to get the nuts and bolts of what's happening on the offensive line. But yes, that is his favorite way to describe the run game. But still, if you could get 4.8 and 5 yards per carry, you're doing something right. And it's the confidence in the offensive line and some of those new pieces. On the other side of the ball, I would love to see both Derek Hall and Boye Mafe get a sack. D. Hall hasn't gotten one yet. He's had a lot of pressure. And I know all those guys are working in tandem, but I would love to see those guys see a little bit of payoff.
Yeah,
and
get
John,
the reward for it.
I would love to hear you use the word britches a little bit more.
Britches, like our friend Jim White over in Tennessee.
It's the britches report.
I do like that.
In case you guys are wondering.
They probably don't know what we're talking about.
They don't know.
I don't think a lot of our fans are reading about the Tennessee Titans uniform combination each week.
Or they might not have lived in the South and had people talk about your britches. Yeah. But that means their pants. So they're decked out light blue jerseys and white britches, as Jim Wyatt, our friend in Tennessee, has reported. So I'm going to put that on you to look at.
All right. Well, I got to pick out my game day britches before I pack tonight.
He's already on track, folks. That'll do it for us this time. We'll see you next week for a brand new edition of the Seahawks Insiders Podcast.